Chapter 8:12 Containment. It's over? Just like that. Rin's voice came out quieter than she expected. She felt strangely out of place. From the moment Michael activated the enhancer, everything had changed too quickly. One instant he had been not too far from her, coated in silent black flames. The next he was gone. Not vanished, just beyond her ability to follow. What followed had not even felt like a battle. It had felt like watching an exorcism. She had seen flashes of movement, distortions in the air, tentacles disintegrating before they could even complete an attack. Black fire spreading in controlled lines. The writhing metal collapsing inward piece by piece. There had been no struggle, no stalemate, just suppression. And then silence. Rin stared at the aftermath, her thoughts tangled. Was that Michael's real strength? Her fingers curled slightly. If it was, then the gap between them was far larger than she had been willing to admit. Her chest tightened faintly. How was she supposed to catch up to that? For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Then she steadied herself. No, that wasn't fair. He had used the enhancer, a degraded epic-grade amplifier that boosted law output by 200%. Anyone would become monstrous under that kind of amplification. If she had her previous armor, her complete set before it was damaged, if she had activated the enhancer herself, she would have been just as overwhelming, just as dominant. The thought settled her breathing. Yes, that had to be it. Her path had never been weaker. Her foundation was still intact. Once her armor was restored, once her resources caught up, she would stand on equal footing again. She was still thinking when a voice pulled her out of it. Rin. She blinked and looked up. Michael was walking toward her from across the cavern. The abyssal flames were no longer raging around him. What remained were faint traces, coiling tightly along his arms as if being forcibly restrained. In his hand was a sphere. Rin's eyes focused instantly. A red-silver ball, roughly the size of two clenched fists, hovered just above his palm. Its surface was smooth but layered, metallic veins of crimson and silver intertwining beneath a translucent outer shell. But what drew her attention most was the heat. A deep, smoldering heat that coated the sphere like a thin shell. Rin's gaze sharpened immediately. She could see what he was doing. The red heat was not the treasure's aura. It was Michael's mysterious, eerie fire, compressed and suppressed to the absolute minimum, thinned to the brink of extinction so it would not devour the core. He was restraining it with terrifying precision. Forced down into a controlled thermal layer that burned only the outermost corruption still clinging to the treasure. She sensed it then. The breathing metal was not fully purified. The corruption was still there, dormant. That's, she murmured. The core, Michael said as he stopped in front of her. He held it out slightly so she could see more clearly. Still corrupted, he added calmly. And still regenerating. Rin stepped closer unconsciously. Without the outer flesh-metal mass, the treasure's true structure was visible, but so were the dark veins threaded faintly between the red-silver lines. You didn't erase it completely, she said. I could, Michael replied simply. Rin looked up at him. There was no arrogance in his tone, just fact. But it's a treasure, he continued. He lowered his hand slightly, the suppressed red heat tightening instinctively around the sphere as the corruption twitched. If I burn everything, he said, there's a risk of destabilizing the core. Rin nodded faintly. That was true. Michael did not have enough confidence in his control to use the abyssal pyre to purify the treasure, nor did he want to use any kind of related ability. Though he would not admit it outright, his first experience with Jester had left a mark on him, making him extremely sensitive to demonic creations that possessed a consciousness. Michael continued, and if anything goes wrong midway, it becomes my responsibility. His gaze shifted briefly to the sphere. I have methods to destroy the consciousness entirely, he said, but using them on something this valuable would be experimentation. He paused, then added quietly, it's better to leave things to professionals. Understanding dawned in Rin's eyes. He was not avoiding the task out of inability. He was deliberately handing it over, avoiding unnecessary risk and blame if purification damaged the treasure. Michael extended the sphere fully toward her. "You handle the rest," he said. The suppressed abyssal heat receded slightly at his command, thinning until it formed only a faint protective film. Rin accepted the core carefully with both hands. Her fingers tightened slightly around the sphere. The suppressed heat coating its surface thinned further under Michael's control, stabilizing as it passed fully into her grasp. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The cavern was quiet now, the violent presence that had filled it, earlier completely gone. Only the ruined space remained as evidence of what had taken place. Michael was the first to break the silence. "So," he said calmly, "what next?" Rin blinked, pulling her thoughts back to the present. She looked down at the red-silver core in her hands before answering. "I'll seal it first," she said. "The corruption is still active, even if it's suppressed. I need to prevent further regeneration." Thin arrays of sealing light began forming around her palms as she spoke, stabilizing the treasure's fluctuating aura. "Full purification will have to wait until we return to the academy," she continued. "I can't do something like that properly out here." Michael nodded. "That makes sense." He fell silent afterward. Outwardly, his expression remained neutral. Inwardly, however, his thoughts were moving. He found himself staring at the core for a fraction longer than necessary. The potential was obvious. For a fleeting moment, a thought crossed his mind. Was it possible to duplicate it? If its core structure could be replicated, even imperfectly, the applications were endless. Chapter 813, Another Deal. But the thought felt awkward. This was Rin's gain. Asking something like that now felt inappropriate. So Michael kept quiet. He did not voice it. Of course, if it was something he really needed, these thoughts would likely not exist. It seemed, however, that Rin herself had been lost in thought as well. After finishing the preliminary sealing, she secured the core into her storage space carefully before turning back to him. "Michael," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for your assistance." She paused briefly before continuing. "To be honest, in this ruin, I'm still the one who benefited the most." Michael said nothing, but he did not deny it either. Without him, suppressing the corrupted breathing metal alone would have been far more difficult, perhaps even impossible in her current state. Rin drew a breath before adding, "If there's anything you want, just say it. As long as it's within my power, I'll do it." That was when Michael finally smiled. He had not expected her to offer that herself. He took a few seconds to think, weighing options carefully. Equipment did not interest him. Currency was secondary. What he needed most right now was progression material. His answer came naturally. "Space-related resources," he said. "A large amount, if possible." Rin blinked slightly at the specificity, but she did not refuse. Inside, Michael felt his decision was the most efficient one he could make. Wisdom's advancement to rank 3 required an enormous amount of spatial materials. Not just in quantity, but in quality. And space-related treasures were among the most expensive resources on the market. Even if Michael had the money, which he currently did not, access alone was another issue entirely. Spatial materials were restricted, circulated only within certain factions. But Rin had both background and channels. They had traded before. The enhancer itself had been exchanged using spatial resources as part of the deal. That alone spoke volumes about her access level. Combined with her academy background as the student of the vice principal, who was a demigod, and her personal backing, acquiring large quantities through her would be far easier than sourcing them himself. All in all, Michael felt his current decision was perfect and mutually fair, given what she had gained. Rin studied him for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "I see," she said. There was no hesitation in her tone. "If it's spatial resources, then that's within my capacity. However, don't think it's going to come anytime soon. It's going to take a good while." Michael's faint smile deepened slightly. "Then I'll leave it to you. Take your time, but put me in mind. The exchange was simple, but both of them understood the weight behind it. Rin closed her storage space after sealing the core and exhaled. Slowly. We should leave, she said at last. Michael had no objections. He gave a small nod. They turned and began making their way back toward the exit of the cavern, their footsteps echoing faintly through the now quiet ruin. The oppressive presence that had filled the space earlier was gone, replaced by a hollow stillness that felt almost unnatural after the chaos. For a while they walked in silence. It was only a few seconds into their return that Rin noticed something. Michael had slowed slightly, not enough to fall behind, but enough that his movements no longer matched hers. She glanced sideways, and then she saw it. Bones. Scattered remains from the countless victims the breathing metal had devoured over the centuries littered the cavern floor. Some were intact skeletons. Others were fragmented, bleached white by time and corrosion. As Michael walked, he casually extended a hand now and then. Each time he did, a cluster of bones vanished into his storage space. Ribs, skulls, arm bones, even shattered fragments no larger than a finger joint. He collected them methodically, efficiently, without hesitation. Rin's steps slowed unconsciously. A faint discomfort stirred in her chest. It was not fear, nor disgust, just unease. It was easy to forget. Michael did not resemble most necromancers she had encountered. He was composed, analytical, and in many ways closer to an orthodox combatant than a grave-bound summoner. But moments like this were reminders of what he truly was. If his peers could dare to dream of reaching the heights of their seniors, necromancers who exhumed the graves of dragons, excavated the burial grounds of ancient kings across the universe, and even sought the remains of fallen gods, then collecting the bones of previously strong individuals was likely nothing more than routine within their circles. Rin watched him store another skeleton without ceremony. Her fingers flexed slightly at her side. The discomfort lingered, but she said nothing. It was not her place to comment, nor was it abnormal within the broader supernatural world. So she kept walking. Michael continued gathering remains as they advanced through the ruined corridors, the faint flicker of storage light appearing and vanishing intermittently beside him. There was no conversation between them, only the quiet echo of footsteps and the occasional soft clatter of bone before it disappeared from sight. By the time the cavern entrance came back into view, the battlefield behind them had been stripped of nearly every usable remnant. Of course, Michael was not collecting the bones he saw around for collection sake or as some hobby, but because he had use for them. Though it had been 2,000 years since their deaths, as previously strong beings blessed by the world, their remains were still very much valuable. Rather than leave them here to rot for another 1,000 years, Michael felt they would provide better value to him, either as materials for his studies or as resources to gain evolution points. The thought of using his talent again also made Michael recall the 2 elephants in his other storage space. Though one was dead and the other was alive and sealed, when he had time to himself, he needed to figure out what to do with them. /N. Please vote to support. Chapter 8:14 Departure. After they left the secret realm that housed the breathing metal, the 2 of them continued exploring the remaining sections of the ruin. Though their findings could not compare to the value of the breathing metal, it was still a good harvest for both of them. Ancient containers, degraded artifacts, fragmented weapons, and sealed materials were uncovered as they moved through the deeper chambers. Most of the objects held no notable use for Michael. Either their functions did not align with his path, or their value lay in fields outside his specialization. So he had Rin take care of them on his behalf in exchange for other resources. This time, Michael asked for materials that nourished and strengthened the soul. Rin did not find this strange. At rank 3, the soul became an increasingly important focus for any supernatural. Foundation, law compatibility, and future ascension were all tied closely to soul strength and stability. So upon hearing his request, she simply assumed Michael, like herself, was already preparing for his ascension into the next stage. Michael, of course, knew nothing about her thoughts, but he was satisfied by her lack of questions. It saved him from having to refuse explanations or fabricate half-truths. As for why Michael did not exchange all his loot for soul recovery, treasures despite his current condition, there were several reasons. One of them was that his soul was already recovering on its own. Being a true human and a mortal god were not empty titles. Michael's natural recovery rate far exceeded ordinary beings, something even the sanctuary supervisor had personally confirmed. With his soul stabilized, recovery had already begun. However, even with this advantage, Michael could tell he would not return to his previous peak anytime soon. Natural recovery alone would take an extremely long time. By his own estimation, it would take years. Though, given his lifespan, a few years would pass in what others might consider the blink of an eye, Michael himself had not lived long enough to view time so lightly. To him, a few years was still a significant span. Even so, he understood what was currently most beneficial between spatial treasures and soul-related treasures. Compared to spatial resources, soul treasures were far easier to acquire. Even if Michael had sufficient funds, which he currently did not, access alone would remain a barrier when it came to high-grade spatial materials. But with his connection to Rin, Michael could think of several items or services he could exchange with her to use her channels to obtain the soul treasures he needed to fully heal his soul. He could not do the same for spatial treasures. Without relying on Rin, Michael also had the land of origin as a fallback. Acquiring spatial treasures there would still be a stretch, but he did not believe that, with his current standing, the land of origin would be unable to provide materials capable of healing his soul. Short-term, soul treasures were more important. But long-term, advancing wisdom to a higher level held far greater value. Unless he was willing to wait an uncertain amount of time, prioritization was unavoidable. And Michael had already made his decision. In any case, the reason he wanted to heal his soul was so he could gain more from his rank advancement task and not because it actually hindered him from advancing. So, Michael said calmly, "How do we leave this ruin?" Rin did not slow her steps. "The same way we came in," she replied. Michael glanced sideways at her. "By answering questions again?" Rin blinked once before letting out a small laugh, the sound light, against the otherwise silent ruin. "No," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Not this time." She slowed slightly and gestured ahead. They soon arrived back at the spot where they had first entered the ruin. Rin stepped forward and stopped at the center. Michael remained a short distance behind, watching quietly. Rin knelt and placed her palm against the solid stone floor. Lines of light began to form beneath her hand as she started drawing a familiar magic circle directly onto the ground, her movements precise and practiced. Michael did not interrupt. He simply observed in silence. The circle expanded gradually, intricate layers forming upon one another, symbols interlocking in complex arrangements. Time passed quietly. Then, after a brief interval, the magic circle flared. Light surged upward from the completed formation, space folding inward as if reality itself were being pulled taut. A low hum filled the chamber. At the center of the circle, the air distorted. The distortion deepened, twisting upon itself before tearing open into a vertical rift of shimmering light. Portal emerged. Its interior swirled with layered colors, spatial currents flowing like liquid glass contained within an invisible frame. Rin rose to her feet. "All set," she said simply. Michael studied the portal for a moment longer before stepping forward to stand beside her. He did not enter immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted away from the swirling spatial currents and back toward the ruin behind them. After a brief pause, he spoke. "So what happens to this place now?" Rin glanced at him. "The ruin?" she asked. Michael nodded slightly. "It's been inactive for 2,000 years before we arrived. With us leaving now, does it just remain dormant for another 2,000? Rin followed his gaze back toward the silent depths of the ruin. For a moment, she did not answer. "It's hard to say," she said at last. "The world works in mysterious ways." She folded her arms lightly as she continued. "Who knows? Tomorrow someone else might stumble upon an entry point and find their way inside. Michael listened quietly. He doubted another person would find this place, though. There was a reason even in wisdom state he could not sense anything outside, and how this place had been hidden for 2,000 years. This floor in hell was also high. Michael did not believe all the rank for supernaturals that had possibly passed this place in the past 2,000 years were incompetent. Chapter 8:15 Departure 2. Rin's eyes swept the surroundings once more before she added, "If I had been rank 4 already, and my mastery over spatial authority had deepened further, I wouldn't have left it behind at all." Michael's eyes shifted back to her. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "I mean I would have taken the secret realm away with me." Michael blinked. "Taken it?" Rin nodded casually, as if she had just spoken about something common. "Secret realms like this are anchored spaces," she explained. "If your spatial control is strong enough, you can sever that anchor and relocate the realm's core framework." Michael stared at her. That was not something he had known was even possible. "You're saying someone could just move a secret realm?" he asked. "Not someone," Rin corrected lightly. "A rank 4 with deep spatial mastery at the very least." She gestured loosely toward the ruin. "It wouldn't be simple. You'd need to suppress the realm's internal resistance, stabilize its dimensional shell, and bind it to a new anchor." Her smile widened slightly. "But once done, the entire secret realm could be attached to anything." Michael's silence deepened. He thought back to his damaged coffin of the Forgotten and its internal space. Looking at it from another angle, did this not mean it was a secret realm contained within a coffin? Michael had seen many treasures, part of which was his own. But an entire secret realm as a movable asset was an entirely different scale of value. Rin noticed the shift in his expression and chuckled softly. "Don't look so surprised," she said. "High-rank spatial users are walking strategic assets for a reason." Michael exhaled faintly. "I see." He cast one last glance toward the ruin's depths. 2,000 years of silence. And now, once again, abandonment. Whether it would sleep for another era or open again tomorrow was something neither of them could predict. Michael turned back to the portal. Without another word, he stepped forward. Rin followed beside him. Together, they crossed the threshold of swirling light, leaving the ancient secret realm behind as the portal folded inward and vanished from existence once more. The transition was instant. One moment there was only the layered distortion of the portal swallowing their figures. The next, the world reformed around them. Michael and Rin stepped out onto cracked stone ground beneath an open sky. Or what passed for a sky. They had returned to the ruins. But not the same ruin they had just left behind. This one was vast and sunken, half swallowed by swamp water that stretched endlessly in all directions. Broken pillars jutted out from the marsh like the bones of a dead civilization, their surfaces coated in thick moss that glowed faintly violet. Everything was purple. The sky above shimmered in murky shades of amethyst and black. The swamp water below reflected the same hue, bubbling faintly as if alive. Even the mist that hovered low across the marshlands carried a dim lavender tint that distorted distance and depth. The 56th floor of hell. Michael recognized it immediately. Michael had just opened his mouth to speak. He was about to bring up what Rin had mentioned earlier, that she possessed a method to carry them quickly back to the first floor of hell without traversing the intervening layers. But before he could say anything, Rin spoke first. "Michael," she said quietly. Her voice had changed. It was no longer casual. He glanced at her. She was not looking at him. Her gaze was fixed somewhere behind him. "You should be ready to run." Michael did not ask why. He turned. And then he saw them. Flying insects. Hundreds of them. They hovered in the purple mist, their bodies elongated and segmented. Wings thin like blades of glass that vibrated fast enough to produce a constant shrill hum across the swamp. Their compound eyes glowed dim violet, reflecting the same hue as the environment around them. But what made Michael's gaze sharpen was not their number. Every single one of them had locked onto their position the moment they appeared. a ripple moved through the swarm. Then the sound began to rise. A synchronized vibration of wings that stirred the swamp mist. Violently, they had been detected. Without hesitation, Michael moved. His aura shifted instantly. The Spartan state receded. In its place, spatial currents surged. Wisdom state. His perception expanded sharply. He did not waste time speaking. Nor did he wait for the swarm to attack. He stepped forward, wrapped an arm around Rin's waist, and vanished. His figure blurred from existence. The ground beneath where they had stood shattered from the recoil force of his acceleration. Behind them, the swarm reacted instantly. A violent screech filled the swamp as hundreds of insects lunged forward in pursuit, their wing beats slicing through the mist like blades. But Michael was already gone. He moved across the ruined marshlands at terrifying speed. Rin secured firmly in his grasp as he navigated the hostile terrain without slowing even once. Only the rippling mist marked the path they had taken across the 56th floor of hell. Wind tore past Rin's ears. The world around her had dissolved into streaks of violet and black. The swamp below reduced to blurred smears of color that warped and twisted the longer she tried to focus on them. She could feel the pressure of movement even without looking. Air resistance parted unnaturally around them, spatial currents, folding and smoothing their path as Michael cut through the 56th floor like a living distortion. Her body was secured firmly against him. One arm locked around her waist to stabilize her position as he moved. Yet despite that, her heart felt strangely unsteady. Not from fear of the swarm behind them, but from something else entirely. Helplessness. Her fingers curled faintly. This was not the first time she had witnessed Michael's overwhelming displays of power. She had seen the suppression of the breathing metal. She had seen the abyssal flames. She had seen the way an enhancer had turned him into something monstrous for a brief window. But this felt different. Her gaze shifted slightly, studying his profile. This speed. It did not look like something a normal rank 3 should possess. Even peak rank 3 specialists who focused purely on mobility would struggle to reach this level of sustained acceleration. And Michael was not even rank 3 yet. Chapter 8, 16 Different Experience. Eventually, Rin spoke. Michael, stop. Michael came to a controlled halt atop a cracked stretch of ruined stone rising slightly above the swamp waters. The mist rolled slowly around them again. Michael released her waist and stepped back half a pace. What is it? He asked calmly. Rin did not answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the distant swamp before she exhaled quietly. You were going too fast in an unfamiliar environment. If we cross into a rank 4 creature's active territory, we will die. You wouldn't even know what killed you. Silence settled between them for a moment. There was no two ways about it. Even Michael, with his many advantages, did not think he could hold a candle to a rank 4 creature. However, Rin was somewhat mistaken about him. With his perception boosted by being in wisdom state, Michael had been actively scanning his environment the entire time. Even if she had not spoken, he would have stopped eventually. The only reason he had gone that far was because he had been looking for a quiet place, which for some reason seemed to be in very little number here. The realization made Michael even more unwilling to remain in this lair. You mentioned earlier, Michael stated, that you had a method to carry us quickly back to the first floor of hell. Her expression relaxed slightly now that they had stopped. Yes. Michael tilted his head faintly. What method? Rin smiled. Instead of answering immediately, she reached into her storage space and retrieved a small object. It was a key, not an ordinary one. The metal shimmered with a faint glow, its surface layered with intricate runic engravings that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. The bow of the key was circular, divided into 4 segmented arcs, each one marked with a different sigil. Rin held it up between her fingers. This, she said, is a 3-star extraordinary rank treasure. Michael's eyes lingered on the key for a moment longer. It allows its holder to switch between 4 specific floors in hell. Which floors? He asked. Rin answered without hesitation. The 1st floor, the 15th floor, the 30th floor, And the 45th floor. Michael's gaze sharpened slightly when he heard that. If this treasure only linked those 4 floors and Rin had reached the 56th floor, then it meant she had crawled the remaining distance manually from the 45th floor downward, through 11 floors of hell. His eyes flickered briefly toward her before returning to the key. Rin, unaware of his thoughts, continued explaining. "It was something my teacher gave me," she said casually. "A precautionary mobility treasure for deep-layer expeditions." Michael nodded faintly. "How does it work?" Rin rotated the key lightly between her fingers. "It's not as convenient as it sounds," she admitted. "You can only teleport randomly within a chosen linked floor." Michael's brows furrowed slightly. "Random?" "Yes," she said. "You select the floor, but not the exact location." She continued before he could ask more. "And there's a limit for uses in total." Michael's gaze flickered again to the segmented arcs on the key's bow. "One for each segment?" he asked. Rin nodded. "Once a segment is consumed, it enters recharge." "How long?" Rin answered plainly. 10 years. 10 years per teleportation charge." Silence lingered briefly after that. A 3-star extraordinary rank treasure. Its recharge time alone made it clear why. Perhaps if the cooldown time was lower or did not exist at all, it would have been an epic grade treasure. Regardless of its rank, it was still an exceptional tool to have. Rin lowered the key slightly. "So even though it lets us skip layers, it's not something you waste unless necessary." She glanced at him. "I've already used 1 charge to descend earlier during my expedition." Michael absorbed that information quickly. So she had 3 charges remaining. Michael gave a small nod. "Understood." Rin lifted the key slightly as its runes continued to glow. "If you're ready now," she said, "I can take us straight to the 1st floor." "Immediately." She paused briefly before adding, "Or, if you still have any business left in hell, I can take you to the closest linked floor instead. We can move upward from there. Manually." She did not even finish speaking. "The 1st floor," Michael said instantly. His answer came so fast it overlapped the end of her sentence. There was not even a second of hesitation. Rin blinked. She had expected him to at least consider his options. After all, expeditions into hell could provide rare opportunities. Many supernaturals tried to maximize their time within its layers before withdrawing. Yet Michael's response had been immediate, decisive, almost eager. Rin was slightly taken aback by that eagerness, but only for a moment. She did not question him further. Michael, however, had drifted into his own thoughts. What he had experienced in hell since his arrival started to play like a movie in his head. The Demon Lord incident, the demonic supernaturals, the rank 4 supernaturals who had been after his life, and many more. Even recalling it now, he could feel the faint echo of danger lingering. At the edge of his instincts, he wondered if Rin had any knowledge of what had been happening in the early floors of hell. But he did not ask. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to leave hell first. After that, other worries, thoughts, or concerns could come. Also, from what he had seen so far, based on her possession of this key alone, Michael figured Rin had likely used the treasure the moment she entered hell, jumped directly from the 1st floor to the 45th, then descended the remaining 11 floors manually. Michael was right. The moment Rin had entered the 1st floor of hell, she had not lingered. After finding a secluded spot, she had activated the key. Without hesitation, she went down, straight to the lower floors. In doing so, she missed the entire incident with the Demon Lord. She also avoided other disturbances that Michael was not even aware of. But that did not mean her journey had been easy. If anything, the floors she chose were more dangerous than the higher ones in a different way. The deeper layers were alive with powerful natives. Chapter 8:17 First Floor. Some floors held demon civilizations, and in some of those floors there were demon lords of their own. Rin had not walked through those floors freely. To descend past the 45th floor, she had to find scattered entry points leading downward. None of them were easy to locate, and even when she found them, using them was never safe. Sometimes an entry was guarded by monsters that treated the area like a nest. Sometimes it was occupied by demons. Sometimes it was a trap left behind by other explorers, meant to lure outsiders into a kill zone. Rin had risked her life several times just to move one floor deeper. She did have treasures to protect her when things became critical. But those treasures did not reduce the danger she faced. They only gave her a chance to survive it. She was not the first person to enter hell with protection. Plenty of people came equipped far better than her, stronger than her, richer than her. And yet, every year countless supernaturals died in hell anyway. Some vanished without leaving a trace. Hell did not care how prepared someone was. Rin did not elaborate further on her journey. The segmented arcs along Rin's key circular bow began to glow one after another, runic engravings lighting up like veins carrying energy through the metal. A low hum resonated from the treasure, subtle at first but growing clearer as spatial currents gathered around. Michael felt the shift immediately, the air around them distorted. Rin extended the key forward. The moment she did, the space several meters ahead split open silently. Portal formed. Unlike the swirling rift they had used earlier, this one was more stable, more refined. Its edges were lined with faint crystalline light, the interior far clearer. Through it, another world could be seen. A frozen landscape. Endless white plains stretched beyond the portal's threshold, broken by jagged ice formations and distant snow-covered ridges. Pale winds swept across the land, carrying frost particles that shimmered like dust beneath a dim, colorless sky. Cold bled through the opening immediately, biting against Michael's skin even from this distance. Rin lowered the key slightly but kept the portal open. "That leads to the first floor," she said. Michael studied the frozen world beyond for a moment longer. Then Rin spoke again. "You should go first." He glanced at her. "If I enter first," she explained, "the portal will close immediately behind me." She lifted the key slightly for emphasis. "The treasure recognizes me as its holder. Once I pass through, it will consider the transit complete and shut the gateway." Michael nodded faintly. That made sense. Rin added another detail. "And there's something else. The portal treats each traveler as an individual entity," she said. "So even if we enter one after the other, we won't appear in the same location. Within the first floor, yes, we'll both land somewhere different. But don't worry, it's absolutely safe." Silence lingered briefly between them. By now, Michael trusted Rin to an extent. She had no reason to deceive him at this point, and everything she had shown so far aligned with her explanations. Michael stepped closer to the portal. Cold air rolled over him more intensely now. He paused at the threshold and gave the frozen world one last measuring look. Then he turned slightly toward her. "Thanks," he said simply. Rin gave a small nod. "We'll meet again at the academy." Michael did not reply verbally. He only dipped his head once in acknowledgement. Then he jumped. His figure crossed the portal's boundary in a single motion, swallowed instantly by the frozen light beyond. The surface of the portal rippled once, but it did not close. Instead, the scene within it shifted. The endless white plains dissolved like mist being wiped from glass. The frozen ridges melted away into streaks of light as spatial layers rearranged themselves. A new landscape began to form within the portal's frame. It was another random location on the first floor. Rin watched the change calmly. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. Her figure passed through the portal. The gateway finally began to contract, crystalline edges folding inward as the rift sealed itself and vanished from the violet swamp. Entirely, silence returned to the 56th floor of hell. Michael's vision went white the moment he crossed the threshold. Cold. That was the first thing he felt. Not biting enough to harm him, but sharp enough to make his senses snap, fully awake as spatial transit completed its transfer. The distortion around him peeled away layer by layer. Then the world stabilized. Michael landed lightly on solid ground. Ice cracked faintly beneath his boots as his weight settled. For a brief second he remained still. Then he exhaled. A slow breath left his lungs, turning into pale mist in the freezing air. Finally! Relief! He lifted his gaze and scanned his surroundings. He had appeared in a frozen valley, surrounded by jagged ice. Formations that rose like broken blades from the ground. Snow winds drifted lazily across the terrain, and in the far distance glacier ridges layered the horizon like sleeping beasts, the first floor of hell. Michael rolled his shoulders once, letting tension bleed out of his frame. Fortunately, nothing had gone wrong after that accidental use of spatial power back on the 15th floor. His eyes narrowed slightly as memory resurfaced. That jump had not been intentional. He had only been trying to escape. At the time, he had been running from 2 rank 4 superpowers, whose interest in him had been abnormal. They had not attacked to harm him, but their interest in him and the pressure they exerted alone had been enough to make his instincts scream. The uncontrolled spatial transit had dragged him far deeper than intended, straight to the 56th floor. Even now, thinking back on it, he knew how lucky he had been to survive the aftermath of that displacement. If he had appeared in the wrong territory, he would not even have known how he died. Michael still did not know why those two were interested in him, and that uncertainty bothered him more than open hostility would have. To be honest, if he had been forced to pick a side between the two forces he had encountered, Director Arvin would have been the better choice compared to the Federation General. That did not mean he trusted Arvin. Far from it. There was something fundamentally wrong about that man. But the Federation's way of doing things unsettled Michael even more. They had not harmed him in any way he could call severe, but he did not trust them. The General's decision to render him unconscious back then only made it worse. Trust, once shaken, did not rebuild easily. So in truth, Michael trusted neither side. And for now, he intended to keep it that way. Chapter 8:18 Station. The first thing Michael did after settling his thoughts was to reach into his storage space. What he brought out was the map he had obtained from the Federation station on the first floor. His purpose for doing this was simple. He needed to find his way back to the station. Though the station had been destroyed in the battle against the demonic supernatural faction rank 4 powerhouse, it did not mean its portal was unusable. Michael's gaze lingered on the empty space around his wrist for a brief moment. Back then, a navigation bracelet had been issued to him and the other students, functioning as a guiding tool for Federation students who needed to retreat to the Federation stations. The bracelet that had once been there was long gone, destroyed in battle. He could still remember the moment it shattered during his clash with the rank 4 supernatural from the demonic faction. If it had still existed, he could have simply used it to make his way directly back to the Federation station instead of relying on a map. But that option was no longer available. Michael studied the terrain layout on the first floor map, comparing the surrounding landmarks to determine which matched his current location. It did not take long before his eyes settled on a marked route. That path connected directly to the Federation station. Michael memorized the direction, then returned the map to his storage space. He did not immediately begin moving toward the station. Instead, he remained where he stood, eyes narrowing slightly as caution resurfaced in his thoughts. Preparations. He needed to make some. There was no guarantee the situation ahead would be simple. Michael did not know if the 2 rank 4 superpowers who had shown abnormal interest in him were waiting at the Federation station. It was possible. If it was Director Arvin waiting, the situation might still be manageable. Michael did not trust the man, but Arvin at least came from the same academy as him, giving them a certain level of connection. Their interactions, while tense or strange, had never crossed into outright hostility. The Federation General, however, was different. Thinking about that man alone caused Michael's expression to darken slightly. Even if he had not inflicted harm that Michael could classify as severe, the act of rendering him unconscious had broken something fundamental. Trust. Michael would rather avoid dealing with that man again. At least not now. So before heading toward the station, he began preparing concealment measures. The first thing he did was cancel his wisdom state. The subtle clarity in his perception dimmed as the state withdrew. In its place, Michael copied the trait of another undead. Fade. Fade was one of his undead, an assassin-type entity. Through his law, Michael could replicate the traits of his contracted undead. The shift occurred immediately. His aura thinned. His presence faded into the surrounding environment like mist, dissolving into air. Even his footsteps seemed lighter, quieter, less intrusive. But Michael did not stop there. Concealment of this level against rank for existences would likely be ineffective. He raised his hand slightly. Two faint summoning ripples appeared beside him. Blue, purple. The two butterfly-like undead materialized softly in the air. Without needing instruction, they moved. Each settled gently against one of Michael's ears, taking the appearance of ornamental butterfly earrings. These two specialized in illusion. The moment they settled, layered concealment effects activated. Visual presence distortion, energy signature masking, environmental blending. Working together with Fade's suppression trait, the three concealment effects overlapped seamlessly. Michael's figure did not disappear, but to external perception he became forgettable, difficult to track, hard to lock onto. Even active scanning would struggle unless performed by someone significantly stronger than him. Michael exhaled slowly, satisfied. This was enough preparation for now. If those rank 4 superpowers were truly waiting ahead, this would at least give him maneuvering space. And if they were not, then there was no harm in caution. With preparations complete, Michael finally began moving toward the Federation station. It did not take long. Soon, the ruined outline of the settlement appeared within Michael's field of vision. He slowed slightly as he approached, concealment layers still fully active around him. The huge circular walls he had once seen from afar were now broken. Sections of the massive defensive ring had collapsed inward, leaving jagged gaps that exposed the interior of the station completely. Scorch marks stained the stone. Other sections looked as if they had been torn apart by overwhelming force rather than siege weaponry. The buildings within the station had fared no better. Collapsed structures lay scattered across the interior. Some had been reduced to rubble. Others stood partially intact but hollowed out, their interiors blackened by the aftermath of battle. This much still looked familiar to Michael. After all, he had been involved in the battle that took place here. The confrontation between the Federation forces and the demonic supernatural faction had reached its peak within this very settlement. He could still remember the pressure that had filled the air that day, the suffocating presence of the rank 4 powerhouse that had descended near the end of the battle. Back then, the ruins had been fresh. The battlefield had been filled almost exclusively with Federation combatants and demonic supernaturals. But now, the scene before him was different. There were people everywhere. Dozens, perhaps even hundreds scattered across the ruined settlement. Michael's gaze swept across them calmly. Many looked around his age. Some still wore academy uniform robes, though many had removed or damaged theirs during their expeditions. Even without the robes as identifiers, Michael could tell immediately what they were. Students. Awakener Academy students. The same batch that had entered Hell alongside him. First years like him. Michael scanned faces carefully as he walked silently along the edge of the ruined wall, but he saw no one familiar. No academy figures he personally recognized. That was not surprising. Since concealment was active and no one paid attention to him, Michael shifted focus. He began listening to conversations around him. Small groups had formed across the ruined settlement. Students rested, discussed, argued, and exchanged information gathered from their expeditions. If he wanted to understand the current situation in Hell, this was the fastest way. Chapter 8:19 Rumors. Michael moved quietly along a fractured stone pathway, stopping near a collapsed tower where a group of 5 students were speaking in low tones. One of the students near the collapsed tower rubbed his arms. "Does anyone even know why they called us back?" he asked, voice tight. "I've been here for more than a day now and no one has reached out to tell me what's happening. It doesn't make sense." Another student, taller, with a torn academy robe tied around his waist like a sash, scoffed. You think they'd recall us for no reason? He said. The Federation sent soldiers to search for us throughout hell just to pull us back. That alone tells you something happened. A third student pointed toward the ruined settlement around them, his expression uneasy as his gaze swept the destroyed walls and collapsed buildings. Look at this place, he said quietly. Just what kind of battle happened here for the station to end up like this? The first student frowned. I heard there was fighting, but this is beyond fighting, he muttered. This looks like a war zone. I have an idea, a fourth student said. His voice was low, and the others turned toward him immediately. He looked around once, checking that no Federation soldier was close enough to listen, then continued. It said the demonic supernaturals sent their people here, he said. They wanted to take control of the station. If they controlled the station, they could use it however they wished. I heard somewhere that they could use the station gate to unleash monsters into the real world. The group's expressions sharpened. That's already bad enough, the taller one said. The fourth student swallowed. As supernaturals who had already entered the academies, even those who came from ordinary backgrounds and had little knowledge about the deeper conflicts of the world had begun to understand certain things. A short time in the academy was enough to open their eyes. Lessons were not limited to combat techniques or mana control. History, faction studies, forbidden organizations, and supernatural ethics were all part of their foundational education. It was necessary knowledge for anyone stepping into a battlefield where power, ideology, and survival intertwined. One of the most emphasized topics had always been the demonic supernaturals. It was said that these individuals pursued power without restraint. Not ambition within limits, not structured growth under law, but absolute power, regardless of consequence. They were known to use methods most supernaturals considered taboo, methods that crossed ethical, spiritual, and even existential boundaries. There were records, dark ones, buried deep within restricted archives but still taught in fragments to academy students so they would understand the scale of the threat. During the Dark Age, when mana first descended upon Aurora, their home realm, chaos had ruled the world. Humanity and emerging supernaturals were still trying to understand mana, its laws, and how to coexist with the creatures that appeared alongside it. That period became the breeding ground for demonic factions. Back then, power systems were unstable, cultivation paths incomplete, and regulation almost non-existent. In that chaos, some supernaturals chose shortcuts. Forbidden shortcuts. It was recorded that demonic supernaturals had used sacrificial methods to amplify their power using human lives. At the peak of those dark experiments, sacrificing 100,000 lives in a single ritual was not considered excessive. There were even records of million-life sacrifices used to fuel catastrophic ascension attempts or summon entities from beyond their realm. Those events had scarred Aurora deeply. It was part of the reason demonic supernaturals were hunted relentlessly in modern times. Not simply because they were enemies, but because history had proven what happened when they were left unchecked. That wasn't the worst part, the fourth student added. The most important thing was that a demon lord descended. For a moment, nobody spoke. It was as if the air itself had frozen. Then the first student's eyes widened. A demon lord? He repeated, almost whispering. The tall student let out a breath that sounded more like disbelief than relief. That's impossible, he said, but even as he said it, his voice lacked certainty. Another student in the group, one who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. I thought demon lords could only appear from the 30th floor downward, he said slowly. We're on the first floor. How were we even affected? The question hung in the air. It was logical. The fourth student, the one who had been sharing most of the information, shook his head. I don't know all the details, he admitted. Most of what I heard is fragmented. Rumors passed around after we got recalled. He hesitated briefly before continuing. But there's one part that keeps coming up. Too many people are saying the same thing for it to be completely false. The others leaned closer instinctively. They said the demon lord didn't appear on the first floor, he said, quietly. It appeared on the 15th floor. The group froze. The 15th? The first student repeated. The fourth nodded. Yeah. And from what I heard, if not for intervention from other races stationed in hell, it might have pushed its way upward. A visible chill passed through the group that had nothing to do with the frozen environment of the first floor. You mean? The tall student began, then stopped. Yeah, the fourth said. It might have reached the first floor itself. Silence followed. The idea alone was enough to make their expressions pale. One of the students rubbed the back of his neck, forcing out a strained laugh. Well, as long as we're safe now, that's what matters, right? The words sounded hollow, but no one challenged them. Because relief was still relief, even if it came wrapped in fear. From the shadows nearby, Michael remained silent, but his eyes had sharpened. Because unlike the students, he knew something they did not. He had been there, and the truth of what happened on the 15th floor was far more dangerous than rumors made it sound. Chapter 820 Search. Just as Michael was about to continue listening, his attention shifted. A row of soldiers passed through the ruined pathway ahead, moving in an organized line formation. Their armor bore the unmistakable insignia of the Federation. They looked alert. They also did not seem to be patrolling, but searching, looking for something or someone. Michael was not particularly worried they would notice him. The concealment layered over him was not ordinary magic. Between Fade's suppression trait and the illusion distortion from blue and purple, even active scans would struggle to lock onto him unless performed by someone far above his level. Still, he remained cautious. After all, these soldiers belonged to the same giant power the Federation General operated under. Just the thought of that man made Michael's gaze harden slightly. It was only after he left Hell that Michael felt he would be comfortable speaking freely with Federation personnel again, and even then only under specific conditions. Michael watched silently as the soldiers moved past his concealed position. Even the strongest among them, who was approaching the late stages of rank 3, did not notice anything. Seeing them pass without incident, Michael was just about to relax his vigilance slightly when the conversation of the group he had been listening to shifted again. Haven't they found what they're looking for yet? One of the students asked quietly, glancing toward the direction the soldiers had gone. Another student shook his head. If they had, they wouldn't still be searching like this, he said. They've been sweeping the ruins all day. What exactly are they even looking for? A third asked, unease creeping into his voice. One of the students lowered his voice before answering. I heard they're looking for a student, he said. That immediately drew reactions. A student? Another repeated in disbelief. What student could be worth all this? They've even locked down the exit portals. We were supposed to move out hours ago. That made the first student frown. Wait, we were? Yeah, the tall student replied. He clicked his tongue in irritation. But then suddenly no one was allowed to leave anymore. The evacuation got paused without explanation. A certain suspicion surfaced in Michael's mind as he listened. But he did not jump to conclusions. He remained silent, his expression unreadable as he continued to listen. What kind of student would cause this level of lockdown? The first one asked again. Unless there's someone important, this is excessive. The fourth student hesitated. He looked around once more, confirming no soldiers were close. Enough to overhear. Then he spoke in a lower tone than before. I heard the name once. I'm sure you all know this person. In fact, there's a chance you had seen them once, though it might not have been a pleasant encounter and may have ended in an exchange of hands, he said. The others leaned in immediately. Well, who is it? The tall one urged. The fourth student swallowed slightly before answering. They're looking for someone called Michael Norman. From the shadows, Michael's pupils contracted slightly. Wait, they were looking for him? A few hours ago. From the position Michael vanished from, silence fell for a fraction of a second. Then both men stopped moving. Selim halted mid-pursuit, eyes locked on the space where Michael had just been. Arvin slowed as well, his outstretched hand still hanging in the air, where Michael's shoulder had been an instant earlier. The distance between them closed naturally as both came to a stop within the fractured sky of the 15th floor. Neither spoke immediately. Selim's expression was the first to change with shock. He disappeared, he muttered. His senses exploded outward instinctively, pressure waves spreading across kilometers in every direction. But he found nothing. Nothing. Michael was simply gone. That was spatial movement, Selim said, voice tightening. Disbelief crept in despite himself. He comprehended his law only a few days ago, and he can already use spatial magic. His gaze darkened as anger followed shock. Meanwhile, in front of him, Arvin looked very different. Unlike Selim, he was not shocked. He looked enlightened. His eyes remained fixed on the location where Michael had vanished. But instead of frustration, there was clarity behind his gaze. So that's it, Arvin murmured softly. I was wondering how he maintained that level of velocity earlier, Arvin said. I did not know he had already awakened a law. One should know that only creatures who had a law seed could use the void to teleport. However, Arvin could not help but wonder if Michael's law was related to speed or had a strong amplification effect on his velocity. From the position Michael vanished from, silence hung for a breath. Then Arvin and Selim turned to look at each other. One wore a faint smile. The other was frowning, jaw tight, irritation leaking out of him in waves. Arvin's hand slid back into his pocket. He tilted his head slightly, eyes bright with that calm, maddening curiosity of his. Then, as if the situation was not serious at all, Arvin gave a light, almost silly-sounding sound. Oops. Selim's gaze sharpened. He did not respond. He did not even acknowledge it. He simply looked away as if Arvin had not spoken at all, then adjusted his posture, gathering himself back into control. I have urgent matters to attend to, Selim said, voice cold. He did not bother asking permission. He did not offer explanation. He excused himself in the only way someone of his status ever did, by deciding he was done with the conversation. The pressure around him surged, compressing the air beneath his feet. Then he shot forward like a storm released, cutting across the sky of the 15th floor, senses stretched wide as he began searching. Arvin watched him go for a second. The smile remained, but it thinned slightly, because for all his amusement, Arvin understood something clearly. If Selim found Michael first, the outcome would not be in his favor. Chapter 8:21 Michael Norman. Arvin was not willing to let that happen. After all, the other party was from the Federation, an organization that had always antagonized the academies. Also, if before he did not particularly care about Michael, now he did. Michael had become interesting. Arvin sighed softly, as if mildly inconvenienced, and then moved as well. Neither of them, not Selim and not Arvin, believed Michael had left the 15th floor. Michael had just awakened his law seed. He should not have the refinement to shift space to such an absurd degree. So the conclusion both men reached was simple. Michael had just moved beyond their immediate sensing range. Either way, he was still on the 15th floor. Somewhere. Selim's anger kept building as he searched. He expanded his perception again and again. Where's this brat? And as both rank 4 superpowers searched the 15th floor with different methods and different intentions, neither realized the truth. Michael was truly no longer within their hunting ground at all. Back at the Federation station, Michael's pupils contracted slightly. They were looking for him. For a breath, he remained still, hidden in plain sight. Even if someone glanced his way, their attention slid off him. But inside Michael's mind, thoughts began moving quickly. Why would Federation soldiers in hell be searching for him? A first-year student. It made no sense. Then an image rose uninvited. An old-looking man with a cold gaze. Selim. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. It had to be him. Director Arvin was dangerous in his own way, but Arvin did not feel like the kind of person who could casually mobilize Federation soldiers. Even if Arvin had influence, the Federation was not the Academy. It was a giant that moved by hierarchy and command. Selim fit that structure. Looking at how he also did not seem to mind knocking a junior unconscious, Selim was the kind of man who would probably not mind using soldiers to corner a student. Michael's jaw tightened faintly. Of course, it was also possible this was not only Selim's decision. It could be the wish of 2 rank 4 superpowers. Michael slowly exhaled. The conversation in front of him continued, but he paid no more mind to it now. Michael's gaze flicked toward the direction the soldiers had gone. Their formation was tight. Michael did not like repeating experiences. Right now, all this only strengthened the one conclusion Michael had already reached the moment he arrived back on the first floor. He needed to leave Hell as soon as possible. If Selim was truly involved, then time was not on Michael's side. He needed to leave Hell before Selim's hand reached him again. Just what do they want from me? Michael could not help but have the thought again when a more terrifying one came. Is it because of my secrets? Did I expose myself? At this point Michael started to look a bit uneasy. If he knew all this was because one party saw him as a holy child and wanted control over him, and another was simply trying to be annoying to that same party, his expression would surely have been colorful. Somewhere deeper within the ruined Federation station, beyond the scattered student groups and broken defensive rings, a temporary command post had been established inside what used to be the station's administrative hall. The structure itself had partially collapsed. One side of the roof caved in, allowing the blue sky of Hell to loom overhead. Yet the interior had been cleared enough for operation. A group of Federation soldiers approached from the outer corridors, their boots crunching over fractured stone and debris as they entered. They stopped before a man standing beside a tactical projection array. He wore heavier armor than the rest, the insignia on his shoulder, marked with command authority. His presence was steady, disciplined, and far more oppressive than the soldiers under him. One of the reporting soldiers stepped forward and saluted. "Sir." The superior did not turn immediately. His eyes remained on the floating terrain projection of the first-floor ruins, multiple scanning markers blinking across it. "Report," he said calmly. The soldier straightened slightly. "We've completed another sweep across the outer sector," he said. No sign of the target. The superior finally looked at him. "And the inner settlement?" "Already searched twice, sir." "Nothing." A brief silence followed. The superior gave a small nod. "Understood." He did not look surprised. "Any other problems?" he asked. The reporting soldier hesitated slightly before answering. "Yes, sir." The superior's gaze sharpened a fraction. "Speak." "It's the academies on the other side," the soldier said. "They've begun pressing again. They're demanding the portals be reopened immediately so their students can return." The superior's expression did not change, but the air around him cooled slightly. "They're calling this an unnecessary detainment," the soldier continued. "Some of the academy representatives are saying we're overstepping jurisdiction by locking down evacuation." Another soldier beside him added, "They're also asking why the search is focused on a single student, when there were casualties and injuries that should take priority." The superior turned fully now, folding his arms behind his back. "Sir." "Nothing," he said, dismissing the concern with a small motion of his hand. He looked back at the projection array, gaze resting on the portal zone at the center of the ruined station. "The academies are free to apply pressure," he said calmly. "But until we receive direct clearance from General Selim, the portals remain closed." "Yes, sir." "And if they escalate complaints, we defer them to Federation High Command," the superior replied, without hesitation. "This operation is under military jurisdiction until concluded." The soldiers saluted again. "Understood, sir." They turned and left to continue the search. The superior remained where he was, eyes lingering on the blinking search markers across the ruined station. "A student worth locking down Hell for," he muttered under his breath. Then his gaze drifted faintly upward, as though imagining something beyond the battlefield. "Just what exactly are you, Michael Norman?" However, only a few minutes passed before the same group of soldiers returned again. "Sir!" one of them called out sharply. The superior turned this time, already sensing the shift in their tone. "What happened?" he asked. The reporting soldier saluted quickly before speaking. We've been ordered to open access to the portal, sir. Chapter 822 Return. The superior's eyes narrowed slightly. Ordered? He repeated. By who? The reporting soldier straightened instinctively under the weight of the question. I'm not entirely sure, sir, he admitted. But word is that some figures on the outside have intervened. Our higher command can no longer proceed as they wish. A brief silence settled in the command hall. The superior did not respond immediately. His gaze shifted back to the floating projection array. After a second, he exhaled quietly. I see. His tone carried neither frustration nor relief, only acceptance. Then we will do as instructed, he said calmly. Prepare the portal teams and begin reopening access. Yes, sir. He paused, then added, in any case, we have not even gotten a hint of the youth's existence. The soldiers remained silent as he continued. We've swept the whole floor multiple times. If he was here, we would have seen something by now. So this is probably for the best. Another pause followed before his voice lowered just a fraction. Still, keep your eyes open. The soldiers straightened. Sir, if the portals reopen and the academies retrieve their students, we do not want blame shifting onto us for negligence or failure of containment. Understanding dawned immediately on their faces. You mean? Yes, the superior said. Maintain passive observation. Discreet surveillance only. He looked at them one by one. If the youth appears, report immediately. Yes, sir. The soldiers saluted sharply. As they turned to leave once more, the superior's gaze drifted back to the projection array. Back within the ruined Federation station, Michael remained where he was, concealed among the fractured structures and scattered student groups. But inside, his thoughts were becoming increasingly restless. Should he still remain here? The question surfaced more than once. Michael had confidence in his concealment. Fade's suppression trait, layered with blue and purple's illusion distortion, created a concealment state far beyond ordinary stealth. But confidence did not equal certainty. What if the Federation General decided to come down personally? What if Selim shifted focus to the first floor? Michael's eyes narrowed slightly at the thought. He did not believe he could deceive the senses of a rank 4 superpower so easily. If Selim stood within range and searched seriously, Michael did not think concealment alone would save him. His gaze drifted subtly across the ruined station. Students were scattered everywhere. Federation soldiers too. The longer he remained, the higher the risk. Perhaps it was better to leave now before variables increased. Michael was just about to withdraw quietly from the settlements. Edge when movement rippled across the station. Soon, several groups started new conversations. Michael's gaze sharpened. The portal. It's reopening. We can leave. Federation soldiers began repositioning. A loud announcement soon followed, amplified across the ruined station through mana projection arrays. All Academy students prepare for phased evacuation. Portal access has been restored. Maintain order and proceed according to assigned sequence. Relief erupted across the settlement. Some students visibly sagged where they stood. Others immediately began gathering their belongings. A few even laughed out loud. Michael watched silently. The tension in his chest eased slightly. If evacuation had resumed, then the lockdown around him would loosen naturally, which meant one thing. This was his best chance to leave hell without interference. Michael exhaled slowly. Good. Remaining here any longer had only increased risk. Michael shifted subtly within concealment, already aligning his movement path toward the evacuation flow. As he drifted toward the portal zone, people reacted to his presence. In small, subconscious ways. A student stepped aside without realizing why. A pair of boys shifted their conversation and created space. Someone looked toward him, paused, and then looked away like their mind refused to hold onto what their eyes had just registered. Michael felt it clearly. They acknowledged him, but their acknowledgement never completed itself. It was as if their instincts accepted that something was there, so their bodies responded, yet their thoughts slid past it as if it did not matter. Even a few Federation soldiers turned their heads in his direction. Their gazes passed over him. One of them narrowed his eyes for half a second, then blinked and looked elsewhere, frowning like he had forgotten something he should not have. Michael's expression remained calm, but inside, he was filled with excitement. One should not forget that it had barely been a day since Michael woke up from his unconsciousness. There were so many new things he was still learning about his law, and seeing himself being able to do things like this raised his expectations. The evacuation flow thickened as more students gathered. Groups formed, then broke apart again as officers directed them into rough lines, and the portal zone itself came into view. Michael slowed slightly. The building that once housed the portal was gone. Now it was open to the sky. The administrative hall that used to surround the portal had been destroyed in the battle. Only broken pillars remained, jagged edges of collapsed roofing, and half-melted foundation stone. The portal platform sat exposed in the center like a heart ripped out of a body and placed on bare ground. Above the platform, a circular gate shimmered. Light folded at its edges as air bent toward it. The surrounding ruins looked slightly distorted. Michael watched the procedure unfold. The evacuation itself was not chaotic. A group of students stepped forward first, each one passing through the portal one after the other. When they touched the boundary, their bodies blurred for an instant, then vanished. Then another group was waved forward. More vanished. Michael watched closely. He did not see anyone inspected deeply. There were no obvious identity checks at the gate itself, not the kind that would slow evacuation. The Federation soldiers were focused on maintaining order and keeping the portal stable, not interrogating every student. Michael moved closer with the crowd. Students near him continued to react in that strange half-awareness. A girl stepped slightly away from him, then frowned like she did not know why she had done it. A boy glanced at him, lips parting as if to speak, then froze and looked away as if his mind had blanked. Michael kept his breathing even. He let the flow carry him. Slowly, the portal grew closer. A Federation soldier near the gate raised his hand. Next group. Students moved. Michael moved with them, and as he reached the edge of the portal's light, he did not stop. His foot crossed the boundary. Space folded. For a fraction of a second, Michael felt weightless. Then the world turned inside out and he disappeared with the rest. Back in hell, a group of soldiers looked confused. Did someone just step into the portal now? One soldier asked. Another replied in uncertainty. I think so. A third shook his head. I don't think so. The situation felt a bit eerie to the soldiers. Michael reappeared in a familiar chamber. His boots hit solid ground with a muted thud, and the faint hum of the gate lingered behind him like a ringing in the bones. He was back. He was back in Aurora. Federation soldiers were everywhere around Michael and the students. They wore sci-fi-looking armor, plated and angular with faint light, lines running across the seams. Currently, they were guiding the flow of students with cold efficiency. Move forward. Keep the lane clear. Michael stood among them for a breath as he sighed in relief. A slow, quiet exhale that he did not even try to suppress. He had left hell. For the first time in what felt like far too long, his shoulders loosened. Then his instincts caught up. Michael immediately deactivated his concealment. Michael felt it was better if he was not concealed here. Not in this place. He remembered the last time he had stood in this chamber when he had come to enter hell. Back then, he had sensed the presence of strong people in this military post. If any of them noticed him walking around under concealment now, he would need to explain himself. And Michael had no interest in giving explanations to the Federation. He let out another quiet breath, then moved with the flow. His goal was simple. Leave this place. So Michael lowered his head slightly, adopted the same tired posture. Every other student wore and walked forward. A soldier glanced at him. Just a quick scan. Then the soldier looked away and motioned him on. Next. Michael kept moving. The chamber soon opened to the outside world. Around him were several students from different academies with their instructors. Michael, knowing what he needed to do, looked forward to where people from his academy were gathered. He wondered if Instructor Sarah was still here. Seeing a familiar face would not be so bad. However, just when Michael was feeling relieved, a heavy, suffocating presence descended on the whole military post, and a voice echoed. It was a familiar one. Michael Norman, step forward. Chapter 823 Power Politics. Selim's impression of Michael was quite peculiar. Aside from his strength, which left the greatest mark on him, Selim saw the seemingly innocent-looking youth as a very witty individual. Witty not in the sense of being sly, cunning, or scheming, but in the sense that he was remarkably slippery. Slippery did not make Michael a bad person. Far from it. But it did show that Michael was not simple. He was not someone who could be read at a glance or cornered easily. One could see this clearly from how Michael had survived not just one near-death experience in hell, but multiple. Each time he was pushed to the brink, left with barely a sliver of life, yet he always managed to escape. Not only escape, but somehow twist the situation to his own advantage. Selim had personally experienced this himself. He, together with Arvin, another rank 4 superpower who was even stronger than him under normal circumstances, had pursued a mere rank 2 youth. And yet, not only had Michael escaped their encirclement, he had vanished from their perception entirely afterward. That point alone left a deep impression. After losing him and failing to find any trace of Michael on the 15th floor, Selim already knew there was a high chance the youth had moved to another floor through one of the gateways scattered across hell. However, he also had a fairly solid guess about what Michael might do next. He was certain there was no way Michael would allow him to get close again, especially after the incident where he had knocked the boy unconscious, and since Michael did not strike him as stupid, Selim believed there were only 2 logical paths the youth would take. One was to hide somewhere within hell for a period of time, waiting until the situation cooled before attempting to leave. The other was to leave immediately. Either way, both options revolved around the same conclusion: leaving. However, based on Michael's past actions, the old man did not believe it would be easy to capture him even if one anticipated his departure. Michael did not seem like the type to walk into a net simply because others expected him to flee. And he was right. Before the command to reopen portal access had even been issued, the soldiers stationed in hell had already reported that they could not find a single trace of Michael anywhere on the floor. Yet somehow, despite that same youth had passed through the portal during evacuation. Selim was not surprised in the slightest. Selim felt a faint headache coming on as he processed the entire situation. Unfortunately, even if he wanted to, ignoring a youth like Michael was not something he could do. Because Michael was not just a talented youth. He was a future godseed. In great realms, or realms on the level Aurora stood upon, the definition of a holy child was very strict. It was not a title given lightly. The only existences acknowledged as holy children were those who possessed the potential to become gods. At the very least, they had to possess the unmistakable destiny of stepping into the demigod realm. The same realm Selim himself was pursuing. But if he was being honest with himself, he did not truly see himself entering it. That realization did not come with bitterness. Only clarity born from experience. He knew his ceiling, which was precisely why individuals like Michael could not be ignored. In Aurora, there was currently only one acknowledged holy child. If Michael was added to that count, it would make 2. 2 holy children existing within the same realm was already rare on a universal scale. But if one considered their individual potentials, Selim could not help but admit something uncomfortable. It might still be counted as one holy child. And Michael looked like he held the greater edge. Of course, the other party had their own advantage. Their power was concentrated entirely within themselves. Michael, on the other hand, was a necromancer. Though calling him a conventional necromancer did not feel accurate either. He was odd. In any case, regardless of comparative evaluation, one conclusion remained unchanged. He could not leave Michael alone. Not only from his personal standpoint, but from the Federation's standpoint as well. Aurora was a massive realm, but the number of gods it possessed was pitifully small relative to its size. Every potential god seed was a strategic pillar, and when such individuals appeared, power blocks inevitably formed around them. If someone like Michael was allowed to grow freely under the academies, an organization that fundamentally opposed Federation governance, the future balance of Aurora would tilt. The Federation would never feel at ease allowing that. If Michael were an ordinary talented student, it would not matter. The Federation had many such individuals. It did not lack Awakeners, either. But just like the Awakener Academy's ideology when it came to their entrance examinations, having one uniquely special individual was better than having 100 merely special individuals. In the supernatural universe, numbers only mattered to a certain point. If they couldn't have Michael or control him to benefit from him, then the best possible action is to limit his growth. As for why the academies were against the Federation, the answer, again, was layered. For one, it was not all academies. Only the Awakener academies stood in quiet opposition. The cultivation academies were a different matter entirely. Those institutions were, in many ways, extensions of Federation authority. They were funded, regulated, and overseen directly by Federation governance. Their teaching systems, resource allocation, and advancement pipelines all ultimately fed into the Federation's military structure. That was how the Federation produced its warriors. The Awakener academies operated under a fundamentally different philosophy. Their power system was difficult to standardize. Because of this, the academies that trained them valued autonomy far more than centralized control. They did not like the Federation dictating how Awakeners should be used. And more importantly, after forming unified institutions, they did not like the idea of their strongest talents being absorbed into Federation command chains after graduation. Especially since it was never the Federation that created them. They only answered to the Federation and registered under it for convenience and respect toward the governing body of the realm. Chapter 824 Another Kidnapping? This ideological divide created tension that had existed for centuries. But the academies were not alone. Other entities also stood within that loose opposition. Supernatural houses, for example. This could not be helped, because whenever power gathered, hierarchy inevitably followed. And no powerful entity liked being beneath another if they had the strength to stand equal instead. The Federation, as a whole, possessed the largest concentrated number of high-rank superpowers in Aurora. That fact was undisputed. But power did not exist in isolation. Scattered across Aurora were numerous independent power blocks, each smaller than the Federation individually, but collectively they were far from negligible. If all those parties were ever forced into alignment, even the Federation would need to tread carefully. Michael's steps halted the instant his name rang across the military post. His pupils contracted slightly as he turned his head upward. High above the military compound, where the sky stretched clear and vast beyond the layered defensive arrays, a figure stood suspended in the air. Selim. He was simply there, looking down, looking directly at him. That gaze locked onto Michael with absolute certainty, as if distance meant nothing at all. Michael's instincts screamed. Without hesitation, his state shifted. Wisdom transformation surged through him instantly. Michael was just about to move. Then he realized he could not. His body did not respond. He was completely immobile. Every muscle fiber remained locked in place as if being forcibly held down by some invisible hands. Michael's eyes sharpened as he thought of his next move. Teleportation. His mind reached for the void through Wisdom's long-distance teleportation skill. However, he reached and felt nothing. Michael pushed harder, trying to force the skill to activate through sheer will. Still nothing. Only then did he notice the truth. The environment around him had been locked down completely. This was the might of a rank 4 being at fully realized strength. Michael's gaze flickered sideways. Only then did he realize he was not the only one frozen. Students stood mid-step. A soldier remained half-turned. A piece of cloth caught in the air from someone's movement remained suspended unnaturally. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire military post had fallen into absolute stillness. Soon, another presence appeared. Then an old man stepped into view in midair. He wore a Federation military uniform, neat and heavy with rank markings. His hair was white, cut short. His posture was straight. His eyes were sharp. And the moment he arrived, his voice carried across the immobilized compound. "What do you want, old man?" The words were blunt. They carried irritation but also familiarity. Then, like a chain snapping all at once, everyone below regained control of their bodies, and the military post released the same collective reaction in silence. No one could hide the relief that flashed through their eyes. Everyone except Michael. Michael did not relax. He already understood who Selim was here for. Him. And he did not even know why yet. And since the newcomer was also Federation, Michael did not believe. The two would end up on a bad note because of him. His suspicion proved right almost immediately. Selim's gaze shifted slightly, then focused on the old man in uniform. He did not raise his voice, but space itself seemed to carry something between them. After a brief exchange, the old man's expression changed. Without wasting time, he turned his gaze downward. His eyes locked onto Michael with eerie precision. "Michael Norman, step forward." The sentence landed like a weight. Michael's heartbeat spiked. He was just about to speak, but the moment he tried, he realized something was wrong. He could not speak. Michael's instincts screamed again. Move, run, teleport, anything. But before his body could follow the command, the ground beneath his boots stopped feeling like ground. Michael's feet began to lift. The crowd below parted without meaning to. People leaned back instinctively. A few students stared, eyes wide, their confusion written plainly on their faces as they wondered what this particular student had done. Others immediately recognized Michael, the spirit of gossip already flickering in their eyes. Michael's body continued rising when he heard another familiar voice. He immediately recognized who it was, and though she was far weaker than the two in the sky, she provided far more reassurance to Michael. It was Instructor Sarah. Michael had somewhat of a history with her, as she was the one who supervised his ranking battle with Rin, and also the one the Academy had sent to escort the students to one of Hell's Gates, their current location. "Can I ask why a student of my academy is being taken away, sirs?" she asked. Sarah's voice was steady when it left her lips, but only she knew how tightly her nerves were wound beneath that calm exterior. Standing before her were two rank 4 superpowers, and she was only rank 3. The gap between them was not just numerical. Sarah knew this better than anyone. Her instincts were screaming at her to remain silent and step back, to let the Federation handle whatever business they had with the youth. But she did not move. Her confident facade held. This was an academy matter, and Michael was not just any student. He was the first-ranked newcomer of his year, a position that had not been achieved lightly. Even more telling was who stood second. Rin, the personal disciple of the assistant dean herself, a rank 5, awakener whose existence bordered on the threshold of godhood. For Michael to surpass her, even by evaluation metrics alone, spoke volumes about his potential. If she allowed the Federation to take him without even asking for an explanation, then she would be failing her duty as an instructor, failing the academy that had entrusted these students to her supervision, failing Michael himself. Her heartbeat thudded heavily against her ribs, but her expression did not change. She met the gaze of the old man in uniform directly, respectfully, but without lowering her head. "Can I ask why a student of my academy is being taken away, sirs?" Chapter 825 Strong Presence. Selim's eyes shifted slowly. They settled on Sarah. For a brief moment he did not speak. He simply looked at her. Then his voice descended. "Who are you?" At the same time, something unseen tightened. It did not spread across the field like before but compressed into a thin, invisible line that pressed directly onto Sarah alone. No one else felt it. Not the soldiers. Not the students. Not even the rank 3 instructors scattered around the perimeter. Only Sarah. To her, it felt as if the air around her shoulders had thickened into something viscous. Her breathing became subtly heavier. Her heart rate spiked as her instincts screamed louder than before. Is this a warning, she thought. Yet even as anxiety crept along her spine, it only confirmed what she already believed. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She straightened slightly despite the pressure. I am Instructor Sarah, she said, her voice steady even as her pulse hammered. Michael Norman is a student under my academy's supervision. As his instructor, I have the right to know his status and the reason for his detainment. Her words were respectful but firm. It only made Selim's temple twitch faintly. A headache crept in again. He had almost forgotten the reason the academies were even here in the first place. The expedition. Students had entered Hell as part of supervised exploration and training. That naturally meant academy instructors had accompanied them. And that also explained something else. Why Arvin had appeared when he did. Why he had been close enough to intervene earlier. At the time, Selim had not dwelled on it deeply. But now, in hindsight, the alignment of events was becoming inconvenient. His gaze shifted slightly past Sarah. He could already feel it. Other gazes. Not interfering yet, but very much paying attention. Normally, Selim would not bother entertaining such thoughts if they involved individuals weaker than him in power or status. But the current situation was different. Because the youth in question was not ordinary. Every move taken around Michael now had future implications. Implications that could spiral far beyond Selim himself. Even this current act taking Michael away was not something he did lightly. In truth, there was reluctance beneath his cold exterior. He understood the optics. To the academies, this could be interpreted as the Federation abducting one of their brightest talents. To the scattered power blocks observing quietly from afar, it could be seen as suppression. And to certain higher-ups within the Federation, he already knew how it would play out. He would be the one acting as the heavy hand, the one creating friction, while another figure above him would step in later as the mediator, the good cop, reaping cooperation and gratitude, all while he carried the burden of being remembered as the aggressor. Selim exhaled slowly through his nose. His gaze returned to Sarah. The pressure on her shoulders increased by a fraction, enough to remind her of the gulf between rank 3 and rank 4. And yet, she still did not bow or retreat. That alone earned the faintest flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. Troublesome, he thought. Unfortunately, she was also not insignificant enough to silence. Without consequence. His gaze then shifted back toward Michael, who still hung suspended. In the air, the situation had grown more complicated than he preferred. But the outcome had not changed. Michael would still come with him, one way or another, and it had to happen before that crazy man came out too. Selim's gaze lingered on Sarah for another moment before it softened. Slightly. When he spoke again, his tone had lost a portion of its earlier edge. Because of several reasons, I cannot disclose the specifics of the situation, he said calmly. However, the Academy need not worry. His eyes flicked briefly toward Michael's suspended figure before returning to Sarah. The student is safe. Nothing will happen to him. I only require him for clarification on certain matters. He will be returned shortly. Sarah listened carefully. But as she stood there, something began to nag at her instincts. A detail that did not sit right. Her gaze shifted upward again. To Michael. Only then did she realize it. Michael had not said a single word. Not when his name was called. Not when she intervened. Not even now. That alone made her pulse tighten. She had seen Michael in combat and had spoken with him before. She had seen the composure he maintained even under lethal pressure. Silence like this did not match his personality. Unfortunately, from her angle, she could not see his expression clearly, but her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Thinking quickly, she spoke again. Then I would like to speak with my student first. Her tone remained respectful, but more direct now. If he is to be taken, I believe it is reasonable for me to confirm his condition personally. For a brief second it looked like Selim might respond. But another voice cut in first. The old man in Federation military uniform stepped forward slightly. In midair, his presence sharp and authoritative. No! The single word landed heavily. His gaze rested on Sarah, colder than Selim's had been. You will not interrupt official Federation business. There was no softness in his tone. This matter has been classified under military jurisdiction, he continued. Your Academy's supervisory authority does not extend into Federation investigative operations. Sarah's jaw tightened faintly. She did not lower her head. But the refusal had been absolute. Behind her, a few other Academy instructors had begun stepping. Closer, drawn by the escalating tension. The atmosphere across the military post had shifted subtly again. Students sensed it. Soldiers sensed it. Even those too weak to understand the deeper political layers could feel that something serious was unfolding above them. Meanwhile, Michael's body continued to rise slowly through the air, helplessly drawn upward by an invisible force he could neither resist nor sever. It was then a voice echoed around the entire surroundings. Who dares to hurt my disciple? Chapter 8:26 Spirit Projection. Among the gathered students on the ground, standing not far behind Sarah, one figure drew attention without even trying. It was a female student in weird-looking armor. Above her, hovering several feet in the air, was the projection of a woman. White hair, long and flowing as if caught in a wind no one else could feel. Her features were sharp, elegant, and impossibly composed. Her eyes were closed, but even in stillness, the projection radiated an authority that pressed subtly against the senses of those nearby. It did not seem like a simple hologram. The female student standing beneath it was none other than Rin. She had been silent since the confrontation began. Her gaze had remained fixed on Michael's rising figure the entire time. Rin did not dare claim she knew Michael inside out, but she knew enough to understand that he did not deserve to be treated like a hostage. After she and Michael were separated on the first layer of hell, she had withdrawn shortly afterward. Just like him, she headed straight for the Federation Center. There was nothing else she wished to do in hell after accomplishing her objective. However, what she encountered upon arrival far exceeded her expectations. She had expected a standing station, order, personnel, structure. Instead, she found ruins, collapsed fortifications, fractured defensive arrays, residual demonic aura still clinging to the surroundings like a lingering scar. It was there she first learned about the Demon Lord incident. After hearing the full account, the first person that came to her mind was Michael. She wondered if he had known about it, if he had been involved, if he had even survived it. Rin searched through the station's remains afterward, combing through every accessible section. But she found no trace of him, no presence, no energy signature, nothing. At the time, she concluded that Michael had not reached the station yet and was likely still somewhere within hell. She had not expected that they would return to Aurora at the same time, nor had she expected to see him in this kind of situation. Even though she did not understand the full circumstances unfolding above, she knew something was terribly wrong. And when the Federation officer refused Sarah so bluntly, something in the air around Rin shifted, almost imperceptibly. A decision formed. As the favored granddaughter of a rank 4 superpower from a long-standing cultivation family, and the direct disciple of a rank 5 awakener who had already begun brushing against divinity, the means at Rin's disposal were far from ordinary. Even without the enhancer Michael had given her, which she had originally wanted as additional assurance for her hell expedition, she still possessed safeguards of equal, if not greater, value. One was the spirit projections in her body. One belonged to her grandmother. The other belonged to her teacher. Spirit projections. Even among high-rank superpowers, they were considered extremely precious trump cards. Because creating one was not simple. It was not a matter of recording a message or leaving behind a spell. Imprint. A true spirit projection required the creator to sever a fragment of their own consciousness. Literally, a sliver of their will, perception, and power had to be carved away from their main soul and sealed into a prepared vessel or anchor. Only then could it be summoned remotely. If the projection was destroyed, the original owner would suffer direct backlash. though if done well it only resulted in temporary weakness throughout the whole process, right from the creation. Yet despite the risks, many powerful figures still chose to create them. The reasons varied. Some did so to protect their disciples, others to watch over descendants. Some left projections behind in forbidden zones, ancient ruins, or secret territories to guard inheritances. And in certain cases, projections existed purely as deterrents. In Rin's case, she possessed two, one belonging to her grandmother, the other belonging to her teacher. Both were extraordinary existences in their own right. But when the situation escalated above the military compound, Rin made her choice without hesitation. She called upon her teacher's projection. The reason was simple. Her teacher was stronger. More importantly, she was directly tied to the current matter. As the assistant dean of the Awakener Academy, any attempt by the Federation to forcibly detain one of the Academy's top-ranked students fell squarely within her jurisdiction. Her authority was relevant here. Her grandmother, though powerful, even if her projection appeared, it would carry less institutional weight in this specific confrontation. And beyond that, there was a harsher truth. A projection, no matter how refined, could never fully match the combat capability of the original body. If conflict truly erupted, her grandmother's projection would not be able to decisively suppress a rank 4 Federation powerhouse like Selim. Her teacher's projection, however, was different. If there was any projection present capable of altering the balance of the situation, it would be hers. And so Rin chose accordingly. The instant the projection manifested fully, the surrounding air rippled faintly as if reality itself needed a moment to adjust to her presence. The white-haired woman's closed eyes slowly opened. They were calm, clear, but also laced with the faintest trace of confusion. Her gaze swept the surroundings once, then her eyes lowered first. They landed on Rin. Rin. Her voice was gentle, yet it carried an unmistakable weight. Even as a projection, the authority embedded within it pressed subtly against the senses of those nearby. What danger have you encountered? Her brows knit slightly. And why have I been summoned? It was then her gaze shifted sideways. She noticed Sarah standing a short distance away. Recognition flickered immediately. Sarah? Her tone changed faintly. What are you doing here? Only then did her perception expand further outward. She began noticing the rest. Students. Not just from one academy but several. Instructors scattered around the perimeter. Federation soldiers present in organized formation. Her eyes lifted slightly higher. She took in the military compound, the defensive arrays. Then realization dawned. I see. Her gaze lowered again to Rin. Is it already time for the expedition withdrawal, seeing how some of you looked battered? Rin gave a small nod. Yes, teacher. Her voice was steady, though the tension beneath it was clear. We've already completed our objectives. The students were preparing to leave Hell. The projection absorbed this calmly.